Welcome to Snow Talk, where the Snow and Ice Management Association brings you trends, stories, news, and personalities that are shaping the professional snow and ice management industry. This season of Snow Talk is sponsored by Western Snowplows and Fisher Engineering. So settle in and let's talk snow.
Hi there, and welcome back to Snow Talk, the snow and ice industry's podcast for the snow and ice professionals. My name is Evan Newman, Senior Manager of Membership here at SIMA, the Snow and Ice Management Association, and I'm happy to be joined today by Colorado Green Pro CEO David Lafour. In addition to his work with Colorado Green Pros, David also serves as CEO of DTSI Software and Prop Tech Pros. With over 12 years of experience in the green industry and nearly 25 years in the technology space, we're excited to have David join us for today's conversation on tech as a customer service tool. Welcome to the Snow Talk show, David.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me today.
Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about using technology as a customer service tool. I get a lot of questions about it. I'm sure you get a lot of questions about it whenever you're at the show, given your background and experience. So we'll go ahead and jump right into things. David, during our time together, before we get started with some formal questions, tell us a little bit about your time in the tech sector and why you jumped into the green and snow industries.
I started my career out in the tech sector. For the first 20 years of my career, I owned and operated a software company here in West Denver. We built software for major multinational companies, brand name companies, Visa, Citicorp, big banks, insurance companies, and that sort of thing. And so I have a real background in using tech that creates efficiencies, but also reaches the end user in a meaningful way. Back in the early 2000s, the tech sector was changing and there was a lot of push to outsource technology, software development, systems development, things like that to India. The tech sector, it kept getting smaller and my customers were saying, you got to match the price that India is paying for software developers, and which is impossible, right? So I said, I've been doing this 20 years. I want to do something local. I want to do something service business, and got into the snow business, which is kind of a natural fit living in Denver. We get plenty of snow. So I got into the business in 2007. I was a little bit surprised, coming from a tech background, how little tech was used in not only the snow and ice business, but landscaping and other businesses that a lot of us snow contractors do in the summertime. That's one of the big revelations I had. Boy, there's just not a lot of tech going on. And so I started, researching tech and really getting back into tech for particularly the snow business, because it's time critical. There's a lot of liability. Tech goes a long way towards mitigating the liability, automating processes, and interfacing with the customer, that was your original question. How do we make a better customer experience? So been working and living that for quite some time now. That's how I'm here today.
I always enjoy talking to you, David, because of that, though. You have that tech experience. You got into the snow and green space, and now you're kind of straddling both lines. You've gotten back into tech, and that's what makes the industry special. That's what makes it unique, is that we have so many big minds behind what we're doing and trying to make it more efficient, more profitable. My background's actually in the trucking industry, where we saw a number of different evolutions happen during my 6 or 7 years with the trucking association I worked for. And that leads me to my question that the trades are being presented with a number of new ways to introduce tech into their businesses. The big one that I saw in the transportation industry was, and now that I'm seeing in the snow industry, was the GPS tracking and real-time monitoring systems that we now have access to. How do these tools, David, increase customer satisfaction in our industry and on the job?
There's a lot of ways that tech improves the customer satisfaction. Now, you had mentioned GPS tracking. That is one component of work tracking, and that can be communicated both to the internal staff and to the clients. Some of the first technologies would show people where somebody is. And that gives you a sense of comfort to know that that person is on site where they're supposed to be. While that is good, what that doesn't do is it doesn't show you the quality of their work or what they're getting done. And this has been a technology shift over the last few years where not only do we have GPS location tracking, but a lot of photo and video recording, which can show people, here's what the site looks like when they showed up. And that justifies why you should be plowing somebody's lot, right? Or not plowing somebody's lot, right? If they haven't met a certain threshold, but it informs everybody of the conditions on the site, and they can see work before it's done and they can see work after it's done. So as you know, from listening to so many snow contractors, it's a big joke. We all show up at 5 or 6 a.m. to get businesses open by 8, right?
Right.
And then the manager rules in at 9 because traffic's bad and 3 hours have gone by and there's another inch of snow or 2 inches of snow. And they say, you guys were never here. We laugh. Well, there's those huge snow piles sitting out there. But the photo, video, and GPS, the time tracking of everything, when that is presented to a customer and proactively presented, so, if the customer is given an interface to where they can see what is happening and they see, well, crew is here at 6, they left at 7, and we just got some more snow. So we'll call them back, or hopefully they'll be back. Maybe they left it in their notes on the service, the electronic record, that they'll be back in a couple hours. So one, that informs the customer that you did your job. And in particular for snow contractors, we've struggled with the whole slip and fall liability. The fact that you've recorded things, you recorded that you were there, you did your job, that really helps to minimize the slip and fall liability. So when somebody does roll in at 9 and there's another inch or 2 of snow, you can point to the service. Well, we did service. We did not neglect our contractual obligation, and we did service this property. From a customer satisfaction standpoint, they know you've done your job. They don't always have to call you or wonder whether you've done your job. Years ago when I got started, boy, when it started snowing, my phone would just blow up. People saying, are you guys out? Are you taking care of our properties? And a lot of our customer base, they're in multiple states. So I might have a manager in Chicago, manager in New York, in California. They have no idea what the conditions are here, but they've heard that there's a big snowstorm. So the phone would just blow up, and it's just hours of answering calls saying, yeah, I've got a crew there, right? Couldn't prove I had a crew there, but I could tell them I had a crew there. Well, with technology, with the GPS, with the photo recording, with, say, automated notifications to where an email or a text goes out when a crew checks in or out on a property, those things go a long way to informing the customer. And so now phone calls are just rare.
Right.
So it helps everybody. And the customer really, really likes to be in the loop, particularly on a time-sensitive task like snow removal.
And anything else to note there in terms of ways that you're able to communicate those things out to the customer in a timely manner, and so that they're, I guess, not concerned over some of those things?
The important thing with whatever technology you pick for your organization is to have the ability to push information like automated alerts, like pushing photos, pushing reports, and also giving the client the ability to see what's going on. I mean, we have an activity feed very much like your Facebook feed or your LinkedIn feed, where you can just scroll up and see everything that's going on, see the conditions, everybody's out working, things like that. So I think today it's not just enough to have a system that records things for internal use only. They have to record things in a way that the information can be shared.
Sure.
And it's not just shared with customers that's important, but it's shared with all the people that need to be kept informed. Internal supervisors. It's best that a supervisor does not have to call a crew to say, have you done this? Have you done this? The supervisor should have the same information that the customer has, and they should be able to see the status of everything that's going on. Real-time status is really a key, not only to keeping the customers happy, but to keeping the managers happy and informed and in the loop on what's going on, so that they know with good status information, they might see, well, in this part of town, we're a little behind because the snow's heavier there. So let's direct a little more resources over there.
Tell me a little bit about how that, you mentioned that feed where you're constantly communicating with your customers and you're constantly kind of giving them some real-time knowledge about the site that you're providing work to, or about the sites that you're providing work to, and maybe it mirrors a bit of Facebook or LinkedIn. How's that translate? I guess, is that where people are leaving some of those positive and negative reviews so that you can get better? I mean, again, speaking from an efficiency standpoint, how are we using some of this technology to make sure we're better the next time we go out and training our teams for future use?
In our case, our customers can see a service scroll on their mobile app, and they get to see all the photos, they get to see the time, exactly what services were done. They can also leave a customer rating. It's very much like Yelp or whatever. It's not publicly shared. It's just shared internally, right? The customer can say, that's a 5-star rating or that's a 3-star rating. We never get 3 stars, only 5s.
Right.
So there's a two-way mechanism for customers to give real-time feedback. That's in our mobile app. And there's other ways to give non-real-time feedback. I know you're going to touch on that in a minute with like ticket systems and things like that. But so for the real-time information, the customers can click on the service, give it a rating, and even put in notes. Please don't put the pile of snow on this side. That's where the boss parks. Or give feedback. Don't forget that back door in the basement.
Sure.
That sort of thing. So
small things.
Some of the little details that get us all in trouble.
You mentioned ticketing systems and some of those services. First place people look for us is in the Google reviews and in website reviews. What can we do to increase some of that customer feedback in long term as well in some of these efforts?
I think it's important to use other technologies to proactively ask for customer feedback. There are good tools, little survey tools. We all get them. You know, if you order a package on Amazon, the next day you get an email that says, how was your experience, right?
Absolutely.
And then you can tell them. And there's a lot of fairly cheap and easy tools on the market for really doing the same thing. And they're easy to set up. There's MailChimp, SurveyMonkey, and the similar sort of lightweight tools that don't cost a whole lot. Some of these might be $50 a month, some might be $100, but we're not talking many thousands of dollars here.
Sure.
And they're fairly easy to set up. And then after a storm, and even during our summer season, when we're out doing landscape maintenance, and as I mentioned before, you know, everybody else is doing something else in the summer. You might do roofing or construction, parking lots, whatever. They're doing something else. And so these approaches are not just valid for snow, but for everything else you're doing in your business anyway. But to be able to send out after a storm a little survey, maybe a couple questions. How would you rate the service? Were there any issues? If so, please put your issues here. Just something simple that somebody can fill out almost without thinking about it, not some 20 question and answer session. They'll say, well, I'll come back to it later, and they'll never come back to it. Just something real easy. You open it, 1 or 2 clicks, and you're done. But that will get that customer feedback that says you put the snow pile in the wrong place, or don't forget this area, or the public sidewalk got covered up again by the street plows. Make sure you come back and get that.
Yeah.
So just the feedback, it's sort of the non-real-time feedback that somebody might only think about the next day or the day after. So those tools, also reaching out to the customer, engaging the customer, and you don't have to be a trained MBA or PhD in marketing to know, just the more you engage the customer, the more they feel like they're part of the process and not just paying a vendor to do a task, a nameless vendor. They tend to stick around. Even when you might make a mistake, they give you the opportunity to correct that mistake. And that's how you build long-term relationships.
Exactly. This industry is built on relationships, and it's getting that real-time feedback so that we know, and we know how to respond and can engage appropriately. Before we get there, we're going to take a brief pause to thank our sponsors for today's episode, Fisher Engineering.
With the next generation Fisher XLS expandable wing snowplow, you won't just easily make your way through snow. You'll make an impression. Available in both stainless steel and Fisher yellow powder coated steel, this plow demands attention. And because it's both 10 and 11 foot widths, there's no way it can be missed. The XLS is the only expandable plow with independently controlled flared wings. And unlike other expandable plows, the XLS has a trip edge. So obstacles won't stop you.
Our customers recognize our internal culture, David, regardless of how that is. Sometimes it's by the way our service providers or our plow operators communicate with them whenever they are on site. Maybe it's how shovelers are reacting. How can we use tech to communicate internally with our teams to ensure they're happy in their roles and best serving customers? You mentioned a little bit about making sure that site manager, that internal manager is made aware of all these different reviews or real-time feedback. Can you share some best practices or examples of internal technology that's improved communication between owners and their internal teams or subcontractors?
Yes. So it does come back to workflow and status, particularly because of the time-sensitive nature of snow removal. So an owner like myself or the area managers that we have, regardless if you're running a business with 2 crews, 5 crews, or 100 crews, the work, there needs to be visibility into what is going on. And I don't just mean like visibility from the photo standpoint, but quick visibility from a status. So it's really important. We primarily do commercial accounts, almost exclusively commercial accounts. And everybody's got to be open by 7 a.m. So
Right.
7 a.m. that's a real benchmark of success and whether we can have them open. Now, the other reality is, what if it starts snowing at 5 or 6? Well, not everybody's going to be open by 7, but the sense of urgency is the same. And we have a limited time to make everything safe before there's high traffic into the restaurants we do or the banks or other commercial properties. So it's really important for the managers to have a status. Here's what's done. Here's what's not done. And so we have a visual aid on our internal mobile app, which has a map. Everything starts out red. And as all the properties get serviced, the little pins on the map turn green. So managers can see where's all the red, where's all the green at a glance. Now, we also have, I think this is real important, things are broken out by routes and by crews, and you have one area manager handles the west side, the east side is a different area manager, and so on, right? However you break up the work, it's really important to have the status. And so each area manager will have their not done list, or just the list of everything that they're responsible for. And as the crews go out on site, as they get the work done, the list of what is done starts getting bigger, but they can see the not done list, which is really important because you know who you need to call. Right. Which crews are you behind? Is there a problem with the equipment? Do you need some help from other crews? So that status of what is not done versus what is done, that is critically important, especially when you're on a time limit. Right? You've got to have these businesses open as soon as possible so that they're safe, so that none of us get sued for slip and falls, right?
Right.
So the status is real important. And then the other thing we haven't touched on, we've said that the communication to the client, we've already established the importance of that, right? That's a huge deal.
Absolutely.
But the communication, the same electronic records, the same photos, the same completed tasks, things like that, not only help the managers to understand where they are in the whole process, but the side effect of that is it holds the crews a lot more accountable
Exactly.
than they were before.
Exactly.
When we were in the paper route sheet days, you'd send somebody out, and then in order to know where they were, if they've got 5 properties on their route, how many have they done? We'd have to make calls, and a lot of people still do that. The electronic tracking of work, not only, as you mentioned, with the GPS, but the photos and everything else, that really helps to put it in the minds of the crews that there's no messing around. We have to get this done because everything's being tracked. And the performance of the crews is measurably better when things are tracked electronically than before when they were not tracked electronically.
Right, right.
The technology as an internal management tool is just crucial. I cannot imagine going back to the old days when it was just paper route sheets and then paper timesheets. And then they'd be really tired after, and they'd turn their timesheets in 2 days later, right? And so we would never know what was done. So whatever technology you pick, it really needs to be both internal facing, meaning that it makes your operation efficient. It makes the communication seamless between crews and internal staff. And it also has to basically do the same thing for the external side, which is the client. Mm-hmm. So whatever technology you're going to pick, just make sure it serves both internal and external objectives.
Right. Exactly. Well, as you went through some of those different examples and how they benefit the internal management team as well as the external side of our business, I kept thinking in my head, man, it's all about accountability. It's all about efficiency. It's all about accountability. So I'm glad you raised that. I want to let our listeners know, I don't think David's saying, hey, we need to be mean upper level management. We need to, hold people accountable so that they're having fun on the job, but also getting the job done, because at the end of the day, it's going to make everyone more money, including our crews, because our crews are going to be able to take on more work if they know when they're going to need to be on site, when they need to be off site, and what kind of time limits and constraints they need to be accountable to. And that also improves safety, I would assume. There's some safety mechanisms to this. So if you know how long it's going to take to get the job, how long it's going to take to get the job done, there's a lot of different factors that go into this, but ultimately it's accountability for higher profits and a higher level of safety, not only for your team, but also, as David mentioned, for the end user, the customer in this case, that we're trying always to avoid these slip and fall and the liability cases. Correct me if I'm wrong, David, but I just wanted to interject there that I think there's a lot of opportunities here.
Yes. And you mentioned we don't want to come across as a big brother tracking everybody. And the interesting thing that when you introduce a new technology into an organization, there always seems to be some sort of pushback. It's new. They've got to learn something, and the way they're being watched and the quality of their work is being evaluated. And so there's always the upfront resistance. And that can be said for an Office tool, switching from Microsoft Office to Google, their suite,
Right.
Whatever new technology, there is going to be a little bit of pushback. And what I've seen with other organizations who I've talked to about implementing technology, there's the same initial thing. Well, it's different. I don't want to do that. But now our crews, they use our tools as a defense of their work. They're kind of, proud. When I call up a crew chief, say, hey, we got a complaint on this property, they will say, hey, look at the photos. We did a great job. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they will defend themselves with the very tools that we're using now. So once you get over that initial resistance, the crews generally like the technology, and they enter information as they're doing it. So they don't have to go home and sit down and write out 20 paper timesheets and then drive them to the office. I mean, it's done for them. Mm-hmm. They have all embraced it. And I have seen this with a number of other companies that we have consulted with and helped get them up to speed with technology. So
Sure.
You raise a good point.
I know that this isn't necessarily your area of expertise. You're more on the customer side and internal team management and how you use technologies. But in the world of snow, we're always guessing whether it's the amount of salt we're going to need for the season or the snowfall that we're expecting through the season. In what ways does predictive analytics really play a role in helping snow removal companies anticipate and respond to customer needs as well as customer requests throughout the year? Any insights or thoughts on some of those predictive analytics and those pieces of tech and the way they influence our industry?
Yes, there are predictive analytics based on data that has been accumulated from using technology. So, for example, we track the amount of salt used on each property for each type of service. Okay. And for some customers, we track the time plowing, time shoveling, time spreading salt. There's certainly a time and materials component that is recorded for each service that we do. So after a season of doing all the properties, we can generate statistics. This particular property uses an average of 250 pounds of salt, for example, and it takes an hour to plow, an hour to shovel, or half hour to do the salting, right? So just for example. So with the historical data that we generate, we can say, okay, if we're going to have an average snow season, which in Denver might be 20 services, 20 to 25 services for a particular commercial property, we can say, well, based on our past recordings of services, we're going to need X amount of salt. So we can plan, we can budget that, and we can say, these are the total number of hours that we are probably going to spend in plowing and shoveling and salting and just whatever kind of services we're doing. Once we get the statistics, then we can say, well, now here's weather, right? That's the problem for us, all of us, all the time.
Right. Right.
Weather's gotten better, but we're still a long way from good in terms of weather predicting. We were supposed to have 4 inches of snow last week, and we got 0, just a little bit of rain, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Didn't happen. So it's a good thing we didn't go out and buy all kinds of salt. But if we look at the longer term averages, then we can say, if we increase our customer base by 10%, okay, then
sure.
we have a baseline to say, then we need to buy 10% more of X amount that we would typically use, right? The predictive part would come in based on some accumulated data that we have. Also, if we had another chain of banks are banks. So you could base bank A, say those take an average of an hour, this, half hour of that, and so much salt, and you could apply that to another similar chain of banks or light commercial retail type properties. So the accumulated data helps to predict what you're going to need going forward.
So how about technological advances in AI? That's the gorilla in the room. Everyone's wondering, hey, how's AI going to impact me? How's AI going to impact the industry? I hear a lot about it from some friends of mine that are still in the trucking and transportation industry. I hear it a little less than snow, but I hear some people talking about, hey, how do we use this to remedy customer complaints or to get back with customers in maybe a more effective amount of time, what have you? What do you see coming about with AI? Do you see it impacting snow in a large way in the immediate future, maybe a few years down the road? What are your thoughts on that, if any?
I think AI can play a role in not the snow business, but as we talked about earlier, the same technology can be used in whatever other business you're doing in the off snow season, right? I think the biggest value or the initial value is going to come in speeding up the management process during a snowstorm. If you're collecting data and people are checking in and out of properties all over the state or a region, for example, your AI could say, you have all of these check-ins in this location. Why are we missing 1 or 2 properties in that same area?
Excellent
right?
point.
Managers could get faster decision-making tools to say, you might have an issue in this region because it really looks like there's a lot of activity, but there's a lot of things missing. I think AI can help also on the back end of the service to say, why did this property have so many resources used versus this one? Right?
Okay.
To identify the disparities, which goes to how you're billing clients, right?
Right.
Are you underbilling clients on one end or overbilling clients on the other hand? Or we talked about gathering data, but analyzing data, that's the hard part. Gathering, it's not all that hard. It's the analyzing of the data that really can be time consuming. Well, here's where some AI can say, you give it some rules and say, who am I spending too much time with? Who am I spending not enough time with? Who am I using too much salt with? Who am I not using enough salt with? Right. And then to compare the resource usages with the revenues and expenses. Those are the kind of analysis that AI tools, I think they'll come into play, one in the field services industry and just in general, but also specifically with snow removal. The predictive part of AI, I'm a little hesitant to make predictions on that because we all thought that there's currently an El Nino pattern over the Pacific Ocean, which typically means a lot more snow for the Denver metro area. Well, we're way down actually.
Yeah.
In snow. So I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe there are people who are trying to integrate AI with weather modeling, but since the weather modeling is still not very good, I'm not sure how an AI could predict the season for you any better than
what we're currently looking at.
So I'm not sure that AI and longer term predictions is going to work, but certainly with the analysis of the data and faster decision making during snow events, I think there's real opportunity there.
So with that being said, David, all this has been helpful. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you bring to the table on this topic and would just like to say thanks again for spending the last 35, 45 minutes with us on today's episode of Snow Talk. Any parting words for the audience of Snow Pros listening today?
One other thought, which I don't know if we touched on, the efficiencies, not only the better management of crews, the better communication with customers, but the efficiency that the technology drives internally to your back office processes. That is just a game changer. Again, when I first got started in this business, we had 3 full-time office people that were just processing paper, snow time sheets. You have a couple storms in a week. It would take a week, maybe 2 to process them, type them in, generate invoices, send them out, everything. Now with automation, we have 1 half-time person who takes care of that down from 3 full-time people. So the efficiency that it drives to the internal processes is really just, that can't be overstated. So there's no reason to avoid the technology these days, and there's every reason. Better management, better customer service, better internal processes. I mean, you cannot lose by automating.
So thanks, David, again for joining us. David, I typically don't ask this, but I'm going to try to start asking a little bit more of it. Definitely whenever we get thought experts like yourself on calls. What's the best way to reach out to you?
LinkedIn is good. You can look me up on my website. There's a phone number on the website, Colorado Grain Pros. You can visit us at PropTech Pros, which is my other brand, helping people do what we're talking about. But my LinkedIn profile has all my contact information, and happy to talk to anybody who wants to talk.
Again, we appreciate you and appreciate your involvement with SIMA and looking forward to further conversations on this topic when needed. So again, I just want to give a shout out to our loyal listeners and our sponsor, Fisher, for making today's episode possible. If you like today's episode or learned something, please share with a colleague or industry peer so that they can join us on our next episode of Snow Talk. Thanks again, David.
Thanks for listening to Snow Talk, sponsored by Western Snowplows and Fisher Engineering. Check out all of our episodes at sima.org/podcast.